Well, don't blame me for not loving you. I was doing my duty. Blame yourself if I don't love you, okay? I got a call from the church. They said they gave Mary a release, a divorce on account of abandonment. I just don't believe that that's true at all. She was never abandoned.
He knew what was happening. He could have been involved. He could have gone to the meeting with me. I know that they use the words abandonment. Really didn't like that. Most people don't like what is truth.
Why'd you move so quickly on it then?
Quickly?
Hi friends, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It's Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024. I hope you're having a wonderful day. The spiritual release of Kody and Meri Brown is a heated topic on Sister Wives, and Kody is incredibly angry about it and very mad that he is being accused of abandoning his wives. And he says that he did not abandon Meri. He doesn't agree with the abandonment. Yesterday, I did a video and I basically explained to you that Kody was trying to convince Meri that he didn't abandon her so that he could take control over her again, have dominion over her, and that he would then not be a failure. He was so worried about the failure aspect of it and the fact that he didn't have control of her and control of the situation, and that he was a failure to his church and to his peers, which is weird because he said that he didn't care about these leaders. And it caused me to do a little bit of digging into some notes from a conference that was held in September of 2023 at the AUB's headquarters in Bluffdale. And they were speaking about releases, spiritual releases. And they were actually speaking about the difference between righteous dominion and unrighteous dominion. And the conversation around abandonment was brought up in this conversation where brethren spoke about it. And I have to be clear, it's very ironic because several of these men that are speaking have abandoned wives themselves or had wives leave them. And several of these men that are speaking about physical harm happening in relationships have also been accused of physically harming their wives and children. So you have to take the hypocrisy. It's going to be thick here. But when they talk to the men and the women in the church and they spoke about releases, it was very clear that the topic of emotionally abandoning and basically neglecting your family was a huge concern. And I remember at the time thinking, this is really interesting that they're talking about this now. And it had me wondering if someone in the Brown family had gotten a release, right? And I always think about how these cults operate. They tend to try to get ahead of things and try to control narratives, okay? And they like to make examples of people that fail, for sure. And they try to sort of separate themselves from what's happening in the public so that they don't look like they're doing that. So when I read it initially, I was like, okay, is this them getting ahead with some propaganda to their followers? Because the Brown family, even though they don't go to the church anymore, they are the most publicly well-known family that is from this church, even though they are not in the church anymore. But clearly, Meri still believed that she needed to go to the church, and clearly Kody is concerned about this because he's very upset by this release and even mentioned that no leader will give him any more wives.
I remember when Sunny and Cher got divorced when I was 6, and it rattled me. I do not know why. I'm still holding on. You gotta be in plural marriage, with a leadership. Leadership will never allow you to marry again if you're discarding wives. Well, I was in a terrible relationship, but wasn't willing to discard them, didn't want to discard them, didn't even know I was in a terrible relationship.
I'm sharing two things that he said there. One, he brought up the fact that when he was 6 years old, Sunny and Cher got a divorce and it rattled him, which I thought was an oddly placed statement. And then he went on to talk about how he couldn't let go of Janelle and Meri, even though he knows that he doesn't want to be in a relationship with them. And then he didn't say that about Christine. He never said he didn't want to be in a relationship with Christine. Instead, he said Christine did me a favor by leaving. I know she did me a favor by leaving. So what does that mean? That he still wants Christine? I think Cody's temper tantrums about Christine leaving, and as much as Cody says that he was not attracted to her, I think he liked her. I do. He liked something about her, whether it was her all red name, whether it was the royal blood, whatever. There was something about Christine that he liked that he didn't want to let go of, and he's still fighting for, and he's still yelling at the the leaders of the church about, saying, "Don't give Christine a release. I didn't do anything wrong." Okay. So I thought, why is he speaking about Sonny and Cher breaking up? Okay. And then talking about the wives leaving him. And then he also says a few minutes later that if you discard your wives, the leaders are not inclined to give you any more wives. And then he goes on to talk about how you don't even know you're in a good relationship, bad relationship, until you get into a good relationship where it's not just orgasms. Basically equating Janelle, Christine, and Meri to simply orgasms and nothing more. Like, no value to him at all. So I want to kind of break down why these two things stuck out to me. Kody Brown was raised in a home that was a LDS. He went to the mainstream LDS church. He was born and raised in Wyoming. And for some reason, I don't know, but I have a hard time believing that Cody watched the Sonny and Cher show when he was 6. He might have, but it seems like it would have been a little bit risque for the mainstream fundamentalist or the mainstream Latter-day Saints church. Cher's outfits would be anything but modest and not godlike. She's a beautiful woman, by the way, but she definitely was not, I would say, family friendly for a child that's in a sheltered church. And I say this because the LDS church is very, at that time, very into modesty, very into, women not showing too much skin, music being a certain kind of music. And the Sonny and Cher were just not that way. Okay. They were very, very, very popular. And I would say that Cher is a huge icon for feminism because she was so independent and so oriented on her career and talented and established herself as she became well known with her husband, Sonny Bono. But then she went on to separate from him and make her own brand and really establish herself in her own right as an actress, as a singer, a performer. She has done a lot in her career. She has won many awards. I mean, she won Best Actress in 1988 for Moonstruck. And she has put out so many albums, so much music. It's like the woman is like the Energizer Bunny. She never stops going. But her split from Sonny, like that could have derailed her and stopped her her career, but it didn't. And it's weird that Cody said it would shatter him because I mean, they were just a couple that had a comedy show on television for a few years. Why I think he brought this up is because he sees the writing on the wall with his own show. Okay. The show ended. Sonny and Cher's show ended in 1974 due to their marital problems, and it was canceled in 1974. So their personal issues led to the cancellation of Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour in 1974. Their marriage was falling apart by the third season. The divorce was finalized in 1975. And when they tried to resurrect the show as a divorced couple, audiences were just really not interested. They were a huge cultural icon in the 60s and 70s, and their divorce ended their show. Cody is not he's kind of not the most intelligent man, but I think he can see what's happening here. You can't have a show about sister wives and polygamy when everyone's leaving. So you can't claim to be a man with 4 wives and have your brand built on a man with 4 wives, right? That's what the show was founded on. It was not supposed to be about a man with 4 ex-wives or 3 ex-wives. It was supposed to show us what polygamy was. That's how the show started, and we are so far removed from how the show started. It's almost as though the show has completely changed, and it has. Go back and watch the very first seasons, and you'll see them talk about how great polygamy is. fast forward to this season and the last 5 seasons, and you'll see how awful polygamy is, okay? Cody knows that if he doesn't get any of these wives back, the show is over. They can't continue to film so in this context. They can't continue to film in this vein because it's expensive. It's completely alienated from what the production company came to them to film. It doesn't meet the goal of making polygamy look good. So then it really just means that they're doing it for money now because it's so far removed from their goal. Their goal was to show that polygamy wasn't like Warren Jeffs. And now they're proving kind of that Cody is a lot like Warren Jeffs. I'm just saying. And Meri made a statement about how Cody had lost control and how she wasn't going to tell Cody a lot of things. And she said that was going to bother him. Check this out.
I'm not going to offer him a lot of information. With me, with Christine, with Janelle, you know, they've left him. They've separated their relationships. They're going to have lives that he doesn't need to know about. I think that realization is going to be a little bit hard for him.
Listen, it's confusing from day one. I wish I wouldn't have ever married her.
The only way that Kody Brown can maintain contact and spy on his ex-wives and know what's going on in their lives is by working on the show. And for the past 14, 15 years, this show has been the primary source of income for the family. It's been Cody's biggest source of income and revenue. It has afforded him a very luxurious lifestyle. And others in the family have had to resort to having side hustles to cover their own bills and pay their own mortgages. Cody paid for Robin, her kids, and himself, and everyone else was to fend for themselves. When Cody started the Kody Brown Family Entertainment Company back in 2010, the only members of that were on the board in 2010 were Cody and Janelle and Meri. Everyone else in the family were listed as members of the company, but not members of the board. Christine and Robin were listed as members along with children. The organization was created to produce the show and to pay the participants. But the kids weren't actually members in terms of like, they weren't on the board, they didn't have a vote, they didn't have a say. And Janelle, and in the early days, Christine and Robin also didn't have a say in any of it. Cody was the primary person that was getting the money and the revenue from this show. That company was dissolved in 2021 by Janelle in November of 2021. Cody has been trying to find a way to ensure that the show goes on by creating and manufacturing drama and trying to get some of these women to come back to him for the sake of the show. Because eventually contracts will come up and the network will make a decision on whether or not they're going to renew the contracts. And individuals that are part of the show that are not part of Cody's family anymore can opt to leave the show. Once the contracts expire, and I believe they're through season 20, if Christine and Janelle don't want to film anymore, they don't have to film anymore. If Meri wants to leave the show at that point, she can leave the show. If they don't want to be associated with Cody anymore and they want to move on with their lives, they can stop filming the show. They could also resign and agree to keep filming for money, but it will not be for any other reason than for money, because it certainly isn't to promote polygamy anymore. So Cody needs to find a way to keep these people in his fold because he's losing his dynasty he's losing his Sunny and Cher dynasty. Okay. And then another alternative, right, would be that Cody would be to gain more wives. Okay. He could try to add new wives and court new women and bring them into the family like he did with Robin in the beginning of the series so that he continue on with this concept of sister wives, which at this point I think would be hard pressed for to sell to anyone that this is normal, functional, or even rational. I think it would be cruel to any woman that would try to be brought into this. She would all basically just become another target of abuse by Cody. So I think that's hard and it's not going to happen. And as Cody said, that once you're abandoning your family and you discard wives, they're not going to give you any more wives. So I think the fact that he makes those two comments very flippantly and fast is like telling you, I'm going to lose the show if everyone keeps leaving me. And I can't And Meri has ruined it for me because now I can't get new wives. He can't go to the brethren and get new wives. So I want to just share with you something that the brethren discussed at a meeting about releases and about sort of what the purpose is of their relationships. The theme of this conference had to do with righteous and unrighteous dominion, and along with being like good disciples of Jesus Christ and of their church. And they spoke quite a bit about abuse that was happening in relationships and women being unhappy and scared of their husbands, and equally men sort of abandoning their wives or not treating them well. And they talked about physical abuse, but then they also talked about another kind of abuse. And I think this is partially why Cody's angry. So this is what the brethren said. There's a kind of abuse that goes on, and I think a lot of times we're not even aware of it. In fact, that's what makes it so sinister, I think, is that it's an emotional neglect. It's basically a failure to respond or notice the needs of someone else. I think a lot of times we fall into this snare. It's not like a physical abuse. It's intangible. It's not that you've necessarily done anything wrong. It's just that you haven't done anything at all. And there's many people who are very complacent in not doing anything at all. In fact, men in particular, we use sports or hunting or camping or TV, sometimes even work projects, to neglect prioritizing some time for their relationships with their loved ones. I think that it's important that when this kind of thing happens, the one who is not being, their needs are not being met, the love is not being shown, they turn to other people for support. These kinds of things, if they're allowed to go on, will eventually end the relationship. I would suggest that if you're having problems, that you start paying attention to the small things, to the needs of your partners, to the needs of your children. Be deliberate in your paying attention. So they're calling men emotionally neglecting their children and their wives abusive, okay? And that it's the man's responsibility to turn to their family and give them the love that they need. Theoretically, this sounds great, but in practice, this isn't really how it works in this cult. But the concept here is what they're talking about, which I thought was interesting because Kody was released based on abandonment, and they're basically saying that this is neglect. Okay. So later in the conference, another one of the council members who has actually got his own history with women that's very much like Kody, this is what they said about releases. We here are a light onto the world. We are a peculiar people indeed compared to this earth. It is a goofed up world that's upside down. Evil is good and good is evil. I can say this, every one of you that decides to recommit yourself with will touch others' lives. They will call you blessed. And in the day of redemption, your name will be known for good, not evil, and that you are part of a loving answer. We're seeing too many families where people are incalcitrant. Neither side believes they're wrong. Neither side thinks they need to change. We do not want to give releases to something God has put together. It's hard to sit on those things, in those meetings, and cry with them and feel for them. Some terrible unrighteousness is going on from men and women. It's not just the men that are big, old boogies bullying, throwing you against the wall. That's not what everything is. Have you ever been cut with a razor blade? It hurts. Little tiny cut, little slice, pain comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes. Men and women are trying to figure it out, and we as a council are trying to get them to reconsider the consequences of tearing apart a family and what it does to the children, ultimately to the parents. There is no joy in sin, and pride cometh before the fall. It's going to get anyone who thinks they can beat this. We aren't born to be Gentiles. We are born to be Israel. We are born to be part of the establishment of the New Jerusalem and the kingdom of God. We have so much to do, and we need people who believe in themselves and know who God is and have done something about it and decided to stop worrying about the wrong things, spending their time miserable when in truth, it's you in someone else's backyard trying to decide for them how they should live. So they're really saying that they're finding families sort of at odds with each other over authority and over obedience and listening. This is a patriarchal cult, and they're not inclined to give releases. He said that we are not trying to tear apart what God has put together. So they're telling people that these relationships are ordained by God and these relationships are predestined. and that you knew you were going to get married and God decided before you ever came to earth who your family was going to be. And so they're not going to tear apart that. And they don't want to tear apart that. So they said, we as a council try to get them to reconsider the consequences of tearing apart a family and what it does to the children and to the parents. Okay. So knowing this is 2023 when they're saying this, they're basically saying, we're not going to let you just get a release because you guys aren't agreeing on things and because you're disagreeing on things. It's weird that they would mention this because who's like publicly having all these massive disagreements and the women are not being obedient to Kody and they're disobeying him, right? But Kody is also being a bully and he's digging his heels in the sand, right? And he dug his heels in the sand because he needed to sustain his show, Sunny and Cher, his empire. So if this group is so uninclined to give releases, you have to beg the question, Kody must have been a real jerk in order to get a release, right? He had to have been a real failure in order for these men who wouldn't generally counsel them against releases. Well, Kody didn't even show up. He didn't care. He didn't care to participate. He didn't care to protest. He abandoned her even in the release conversation. So they couldn't even counsel Kody on the fact that he was being a bad husband. And there's a lot of responsibility on men in this group. There is, okay? But for Kody to say that he doesn't have a choice, he did have a choice. He could have 100% gone to the church and spoken and had conversations with them. And if he wanted to not be released, he could have asked that they not have a release. Truthfully, truth be told, I wish that there was more audio, video, and such that I could share with you from the church. And I have a ton, and I'll probably start sifting through some of these talks that have been shared by people at the church because I think fans of the show don't really know a whole lot about the faith of this church. And it's very easy for us in our worldview to apply what we think is happening if we don't understand what the beliefs are behind it. And because the family has done such a terrible job really sharing what their beliefs are, and I think it's because TLC is intentionally hiding that, you realize that as much as I hate Robin and as much as I don't understand why Meri stayed, they're told from the time that they're very young girls in their groups that they had lived in a pre-mortal existence. There's actually a talk that Rulon Allred gave back in the 1970s, and he spoke about how the pre-mortal existence, all of them existed as spirits in heaven, and they were up in their pre-mortal existence preparing to come to Earth to fulfill their mission, which was to return the world to the New Jerusalem and to, convert everyone into their faith, rid the world of evildoers, populate the world with white babies, and all of that. It's kind of weird and gross. But because they tell kids, this is what they tell kids. They say, you had a premortal existence. And I've heard audio of them doing this. And when you were up there, you were learning and being taught the rules of this world. And you were preparing to come down here. And then you were actually picked by God to go to a family. So when Robin says, I have a spirit baby up there, that's what she's talking about. So God has chosen you for this family. You're their spirit. And so to disrupt the family means that they have disrupted God's plan. And women are taught that they need to have a testimony about who they're to marry and a testimony to live plural marriage. But they're also told that the only way that they can live and get to the celestial kingdom is by having by being a plural wife or, sharing their husband. Men are told they have to have a minimum of 3 to get to the celestial kingdom, 5 to be a leader of endowments, 7 to be a prophet. And so they have levels they need to achieve in order to get to the different levels in heaven. And marriages are supposed to be of a divine revelation. And so if God is telling you and commanding you that this is where you're supposed to be, that's why they say it's destiny. That's why Robin said destiny. And that's why Kody was saying it wasn't destiny. It wasn't. So let's just do this without destiny. So Robin came in believing that this was her vision from God and that this was the family she was supposed to be with. And she was supposed to bring babies down from the spirit world for Cody to populate his kingdom. And so when families break up, it's hard for some people that are still believers because they feel like they have failed God and that they are doing something against God. And then if they do something against God, they feel like their salvation is at stake. And it's very psychologically torturous to people to keep them in this sort of fear that they have to stay in these situations. And it's also very psychologically cruel for someone to be told that you were picked for this family and you have to stay there. And if you don't stay there, God will hate you and you're going against God. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone, right? It's not fair. And so if people truly believe this and they believe that they're chosen by God to come down to this world and do this mission for these people and spread the word of the gospel through plural marriage, then they truly feel like they've failed if it all blows up. Cody, I think, is on this teetering line of where think he believes in some of it, but not all of it. I think Robin still believes in all of it. And I think that's why Cody is doing all of this partially to satisfy her because he brought her in on the lie that he was going to do this forever and this was destiny. And now he's saying it wasn't destiny. And that's manipulation in and of itself. Robin could have married another man in the church that maybe wasn't doing it to con her and wasn't doing it so he could get a TV show. And she could have been with someone else that might not have treated her this way or blew up his family this way. It's hard to know. But she had other options, as she says. So really, Cody's didn't participate in the release process. He was incalcitrant to the authority of the leaders and didn't listen to them and didn't want to take on the responsibility of being the leader of his family and didn't want to have love and compassion and tenderness in his care and concern for people and was motivated by selfish motives of fame and celebrity and money. And all of those things blew up his family. There's lots of people that believe in polygamy and this is what they do and they think they have to do this. They're called to do this and they would never have gone this route because it would have been sacrilegious because this is supposed to be a church that's all about selflessness, not selfishness. And Cody has displayed that he's all about himself and all about his ego. And he's motivated by not going back to poverty. And so Cody's trying to gaslight Meri to stay and to change her mind and to try to change what these leaders have done. But the problem is that now that they've unsealed her from him, they have no contract in heaven now. And Cody can't go back to the church and say he wants to remarry her because they'll be like, you didn't show up, right? And they're like, you're kicked out because you failed so badly at your job. You put your pride and your ego above everything else. You're out, dude. So the church is trying, obviously, to get ahead of the storm of Kody Brown, but just because they say these things doesn't mean they actually in practice these men do these things. There are some good men in this group, but a lot of the men are bad and just like Cody. Just going to put that out there. So that's what this is all about. The motive here that Meri is kind of exposing is that Cody's losing control of his family and he won't be able to control what's happening in the lives of Janelle and Christine and Meri, which is going to make him upset because then he can't dictate and control if the show goes on, right? And that's going to bother him. And it's going to bother him that he's lost his possessions in heaven. It's going to bother his wife who wants their money. It's going to bother him who wants their money. And he's talking about Sunny and Cher because he knows the show will not last if this continues to happen. And Meri ruined his chances to get more wives. So I hope I connected all of these dots for you. What are your thoughts about this? Make sure to leave some comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed and click the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, everyone.